In a galaxy where humanity was considered the weakest species, where Earth's creatures were mocked as primitive and soft, one woman's decision to rescue a dying alien would spark the greatest revolution the universe had ever seen. But it wasn't a warrior she saved, or a brilliant scientist, or a powerful leader. It was something the entire galactic community feared and despised, a creature so dangerous that even its own kind abandoned it to die. What Sarah Chun didn't know when she walked into that alien animal shelter was that she was about to prove something that would shake every civilization to its core. Sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't advanced technology or superior intellect. Sometimes it's simply the courage to show kindness when everyone else shows fear. This is the story of how one human's compassion became the weapon that no alien empire could defeat. Sarah Chun had always been different from other humans. While most of humanity cowered in their designated sectors of the galaxy, grateful for whatever scraps the Galactic Council threw their way, Sarah refused to accept that Earthborn species were inferior. As a xenobiologist working on the trading station Kepler 442, she had dedicated her life to studying alien creatures that others deemed too dangerous, too strange, or too worthless to bother with. The Kepler station orbited a dying star, serving as a waypoint for traders, refugees, and the unwanted. It was here that the galaxy's rejects gathered, and Sarah had made it her mission to understand them all. She had worked with crystalline beetles that could cut through diamond, studied gas-based life forms that existed in 6 dimensions, and even befriended a hive mind fungus that spoke in mathematical equations. But nothing had prepared her for the call she received that cold Tuesday morning. "Dr. Chun, we need you at the shelter immediately," came the urgent voice of Administrator Kex, a 4-armed Illyrian who ran the station's animal rescue facility. His usually calm tone carried an edge of panic that made Sarah's stomach tighten. The shelter was located in the station's lower levels, where the artificial gravity was weaker and the lighting dimmer. It was a place where alien creatures that had been abandoned, abused, or simply outlived their usefulness were brought to live out their final days. Most species in the galaxy treated their animals as tools or property, and when those tools broke, they ended up here. Sarah hurried through the winding corridors, her boots echoing against the metal flooring. The smell of ozone and recycled air mixed with the various scents of hundreds of different alien life forms. She had grown to love this place, despite its sadness. Here, she could make a real difference in the lives of creatures that had been thrown away by their own kind. When she arrived at the shelter, Administrator Kex was waiting for her outside the quarantine section. His blue-green skin had taken on a pale hue, and all 4 of his arms were clasped tightly in front of him. "Sarah, I need to warn you about what you're about to see," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A Vorthack freighter brought something in this morning. They said they found it drifting in space, nearly dead." Sarah frowned. The Vorthack were known for their efficiency, not their compassion. If they had gone out of their way to rescue an animal, it must be something significant. "What species?" she asked, already pulling on her protective gear. Kex hesitated, his tentacle-like fingers ringing together. "It's a Zrakti, he whispered, as if saying the name too loudly might summon something terrible. Sarah's hands froze on her equipment belt. She had heard of the Zrakti, though she had never seen one. They were legendary throughout the galaxy, but not in a good way. According to every source she had read, they were monsters, creatures of pure aggression that had once terrorized entire star systems before their own kind had hunted them to near extinction. Most species believe them to be extinct entirely. "That's impossible," Sarah said, her scientific mind immediately questioning the identification. "The last confirmed Zrakti was killed over 200 years ago." "That's what we thought too," Kex replied, gesturing toward the sealed quarantine chamber. "But the bioscanners don't lie. The genetic markers are a perfect match. Whatever this thing is, it's definitely a Zrakti." Sarah approached the viewing window slowly, her heart pounding. The quarantine chamber was designed to hold the most dangerous life forms in the galaxy, with force fields, atmospheric controls, and emergency containment protocols. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum, she could see a small form huddled in the far corner of the sterile white room. The creature was unlike anything she had expected. Where she had imagined a fearsome predator, she saw something that looked more like a cross between a large cat and a small dragon. It was about the size of a medium earth dog, with sleek black fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its body was lean and muscular, built for speed and agility. Most striking were its eyes, large, intelligent, and a brilliant silver that seemed to glow with an inner light. But it was clearly dying. The creature's breathing was labored, its ribs showing through its matted fur. Deep wounds marked its body, some old and scarred, others fresh and still bleeding. Its silver eyes were dull with pain and exhaustion, and it barely lifted its head when Sarah approached the window. "How long has it been here?" Sarah asked, her voice soft. 6 hours, Kex replied. The Vorthack said they found it in an escape pod that had been drifting for weeks, maybe months. The pod's life support was failing. They probably saved it from certain death, though I'm not sure they did it any favors. Sarah studied the creature more closely. There was something in its eyes that contradicted everything she had read about its species. Where there should have been savage hunger or mindless aggression, she saw intelligence, awareness, and something that looked almost like sorrow. "Has anyone tried to treat its injuries?" she asked. Kex's skin shifted to a darker shade of blue, a sign of his distress. "Sarah, no one wants to get near that thing." The station's medical staff refused to enter the chamber. They're all terrified it's going to suddenly wake up and start killing everything in sight. "But it's dying," Sarah protested. "Look at it. It can barely lift its head." "Maybe that's for the best," came a harsh voice from behind them. Sarah turned to see Captain Morvek, the station security chief, approaching with his usual scowl. The Krillian was built like a walking tank, with rock-like skin and eyes that glowed red with cybernetic implants. "That thing is a Zrak TI. Do you have any idea what they're capable of?" "I've read the historical accounts," Sarah replied, turning back to watch the creature. "But this one is obviously not a threat in its current condition." Morvek snorted, a sound like grinding stone. "Historical accounts? Let me tell you what I know about Zrak TI. My grandfather fought in the Outer Rim Wars. He saw what these things could do. A single Zrak TI could tear through a platoon of armed soldiers like they were made of paper. They're killing machines, bred for nothing but destruction." Sarah watched as the creature struggled to change position, its movements slow and painful. "Then, why isn't this one trying to kill us? Why isn't it throwing itself against the containment field or showing any signs of aggression?" "Because it's dying," Morvek said bluntly. "And the galaxy will be safer when it's dead." The casual cruelty in his voice made Sarah's jaw clench. This was exactly the kind of thinking that made her ashamed to be part of the galactic community, sometimes. Fear and prejudice overriding any sense of compassion or scientific curiosity. "I want to go in there," Sarah announced suddenly. The silence that followed was deafening. Kex's 4 arms began gesticulating wildly, and Morvek's cybernetic eyes flared brighter. "Absolutely not," Morvek growled. "I won't authorize it." "You don't have the authority to stop me," Sarah replied calmly. "This facility falls under scientific research protocols, not security. And as the senior xenobiologist on the station, I have the right to examine any specimen brought here." Kex stepped between them, his diplomatic training kicking in. "Sarah, please be reasonable. Even if the creature is too weak to pose an immediate threat, we don't know anything about its biology. It could carry diseases, emit toxic compounds, or have defense mechanisms we're not aware of." Sarah was already checking her protective gear, running through decontamination procedures in her mind. "Then we'll find out. That's what science is for." She had made up her mind, and nothing was going to change it. There was something about the creature that called to her, something beyond scientific curiosity. Maybe it was the way it reminded her of Earth cats she had known as a child, or maybe it was simply her refusal to let fear and prejudice dictate her actions. Whatever the reason, she knew she couldn't walk away. The airlock to the quarantine chamber hissed open, and Sarah stepped inside. The atmosphere was thick with the smell of antiseptic and something else, something wild and alien that made her primitive brain want to run. But she forced herself to move slowly, keeping her hands visible and her movements non-threatening. The creature's head lifted slightly as she entered, and those silver eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the sterile room. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could feel the weight of thousands of years of ingrained fear pressing down on her. Then, the creature did something unexpected. It lowered its head and made a sound, soft, almost musical, like a cross between a purr and a song. It wasn't aggressive or threatening. If anything, it sounded sad, lonely, and desperate for contact. Sarah took another step forward, then another. The creature didn't move, didn't show any signs of aggression. Its breathing remained labored, its body trembling with exhaustion. When Sarah was close enough to touch it, she knelt down slowly, her hand extended palm up. "Hey there," she whispered, her voice gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's nostrils flared as it caught her scent, and its ears, pointed and mobile like a cat's, twitched slightly. After a long moment, it stretched its neck forward and touched its nose to her palm. The contact sent a shock through both of them. Sarah felt a sudden rush of emotion that wasn't her own: pain, loneliness, confusion, and underneath it all, a desperate hope. The creature's eyes widened, and, for a moment, Sarah could swear she saw recognition there. From outside the chamber, she heard Morvet cursing in his native language and Kex muttering prayers to various deities. But Sarah ignored them, focusing entirely on the magnificent creature before her. Up close, she could see the true extent of its injuries. Burns from energy weapons, cuts from claws or blades, and older scars that spoke of a lifetime of violence. But she could also see the grace in its movements, the intelligence in its eyes, and the way it responded to gentle touch with something approaching trust. "What happened to you?" Sarah whispered, her hand stroking gently along the creature's head. "Who hurt you like this?" As if in response to her question, the creature lifted its head and looked toward the viewing window where the others stood watching. Its expression changed, becoming guarded and fearful. It pressed closer to Sarah, as if seeking protection from their stares. The gesture broke Sarah's heart. This was supposed to be a monster, a creature of pure aggression and violence. Instead, she was seeing something that had been hurt and abandoned, something that was reaching out for kindness from the first being to show it any. She made her decision then and there, though she knew it would change her life forever. "I'm taking you home," she whispered to the creature, and its silver eyes seemed to brighten slightly at her words. Outside the chamber, arguments began immediately. Morvek demanded she leave the creature to die. Kex worried about protocols and regulations. Other staff members gathered to stare at the impossible sight of a human showing compassion to the galaxy's most feared predator. But Sarah wasn't listening to any of them. She was too busy making plans, medical treatment for the creature's injuries, a safe place for it to recover, and somehow, someway, a chance to prove to the galaxy that their fears and prejudices were wrong. She had no idea that her decision would set in motion events that would reshape the entire galactic order. She only knew that this creature needed help, and she was going to provide it, no matter what anyone else thought. The Zrakti looked up at her with those brilliant silver eyes, and Sarah could swear she saw gratitude there. For the first time in hours, its breathing seemed to steady, and the tension in its body began to ease. It was the beginning of something that would prove, once and for all, that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in their weapons or their technology. It was in their stubborn refusal to give up on those who needed help, even when everyone else had already written them off as lost. The next 72 hours tested every limit of Sarah's determination and medical knowledge. Getting permission to remove the Zrakti from quarantine had required calling in favors from across 3-star systems and threatening to resign from her position twice. In the end, it was Dr. Elon Reese, the chief medical officer of Kepler Station and Sarah's closest friend, who provided the breakthrough. "If you're determined to kill yourself over this creature," Elon had said, her weathered face creased with worry, "then at least do it in my medical bay where I can monitor your vital signs and have emergency protocols ready." Elon was one of the few beings on the station who didn't seem afraid of the Zrakti, though her reasons were purely practical. As a former battlefield medic who had served in conflicts across the galaxy, she had seen enough real monsters to recognize when something was simply injured rather than inherently dangerous. The medical bay was on level 7, far from the main civilian areas, but equipped with the most advanced treatment facilities on the station. Sarah had spent the past day converting one of the larger recovery rooms into a temporary habitat for her patient, complete with soft bedding, climate controls, and monitoring equipment that could track everything from heart rate to neural activity. Moving the Zrakti had been a delicate operation. Despite its weakened state, the creature had panicked when the medical team approached with a transport stretcher. It wasn't until Sarah entered the chamber and spoke softly to it that the creature calmed enough to allow itself to be moved. "Now, As Sarah sat beside the medical bed where the Zraktai lay recovering, she marveled at how much the situation had changed. The creature, she had started thinking of it as she, after the medical scans confirmed the gender, was sleeping peacefully for the first time since her arrival. The worst of her wounds had been cleaned and sealed, and a steady drip of nutrients flowed through an 4-line that had taken 3 different sedatives to install. Her cellular structure is unlike anything I've ever seen, Elon observed, studying the readouts from her scanner. These regenerative capabilities are remarkable. Injuries that should take months to heal are already showing significant improvement after just 2 days. Sarah nodded, gently stroking the soft fur along the Zraktai's head. The creature had taken to her touch immediately, and Sarah had discovered that physical contact seemed to accelerate the healing process somehow. It was as if the Zraktai drew strength from the connection, though Sarah couldn't explain the mechanism behind it. What's more interesting, Elon continued, is her neurological activity. The brain scans show patterns I've only seen in the most intelligent species. This isn't some mindless predator, Sarah. This creature is as smart as you or me, possibly smarter. The revelation didn't surprise Sarah. She had suspected as much from the way the Zraktai responded to her voice, the way those silver eyes seemed to track conversations even when the creature appeared to be sleeping. There was a depth of awareness there that contradicted everything the historical records claimed about the species. Have you decided on a name for her? Elon asked, making notes on her datapad. Sarah had been thinking about that. Every fiber of scientific training told her to maintain professional distance, to refer to the creature by designation or species name. But, looking down at the peaceful face, the way the Zraktai's breathing had synchronized with her own heartbeat, Sarah knew that ship had already sailed. Luna, she said softly. Her eyes remind me of moonlight. As if hearing her name, Luna's eyes opened slowly, focusing immediately on Sarah's face. The silver irises seemed brighter today, clearer than they had been since her arrival. Luna lifted her head slightly and made that same musical sound Sarah had heard in the quarantine chamber, though now it seemed stronger, more content. Hello, beautiful, Sarah whispered, and Luna's ears twitched forward in response. What happened next changed everything Sarah thought she knew about interspecies communication. Luna's eyes locked onto Sarah's, and suddenly, Sarah felt a presence in her mind, not invasive or controlling, but gentle, like a whispered question. Images flashed through her consciousness. Vast star fields, a world of crystalline structures, and floating cities, creatures that looked like Luna, but moved in coordinated groups through silver forests. Then, the images shifted, becoming darker. Fire in the sky, explosions that shattered crystal spires, Luna's people falling as weapons she didn't recognize tore through their ranks. Fear, pain, loss, and then emptiness. Luna alone, drifting in the cold of space, waiting to die. Sarah gasped, the connection breaking as tears streamed down her face. Luna whimpered softly, pressing her head against Sarah's hand as if to comfort her. What just happened? Elon demanded, her scanners going wild with readings from both Sarah and Luna. Your neural activity spiked off the charts, and so did hers. Sarah wiped her eyes, trying to process what she had experienced. She showed me something, she whispered. Memories, I think. Her homeworld, her people, what happened to them? Elon's expression grew serious. Sarah, that's impossible. No known species has the ability to share memories directly through mental contact. The neural pathways required for that kind of communication would be what? Sarah interrupted. Beyond our understanding? We know almost nothing about Zraktai biology. What if everything we thought we knew about them was wrong? Before Elon could respond, the medical bay's emergency comm system activated. Captain Morvek's voice filled the room, urgent and angry. Dr. Chun, report to the command center immediately. We have a situation. Sarah looked down at Luna, who had curled up against her side, seeking comfort. I can't leave her alone. Not yet. I'll stay with her, Elon offered, though her expression showed she was still processing what she had witnessed. Go see what has Morvek so worked up. But, Sarah, be careful. Word about what you're doing here has spread beyond the station. The command center was buzzing with activity when Sarah arrived. Holographic displays showed incoming ships, communication logs, and star charts marking positions throughout the sector. Captain Morvek stood in the center of it all, his rocky features set in their permanent scowl. Ah, Dr. Chun, he said without looking at her. Perfect timing. Perhaps you can explain to me why we're suddenly receiving diplomatic inquiries from half the galaxy about our Zrak-Ti specimen. Sarah's stomach dropped. What kind of inquiries? The kind that come with warships attached, Morvek replied, gesturing to the tactical display. The hegemony wants to inspect our facility. The Vorthack Confederation is demanding the creature be turned over to their research division. And 3 separate mercenary groups have offered to dispose of the problem for us. Sarah stared at the display, watching the ominous red dots that represented incoming ships. How did word get out so quickly? Station gossip travels faster than light, Administrator Kex said, joining the conversation. His blue skin had taken on an even paler hue than usual. Half our trading partners have already changed course to avoid us. The other half are coming to see the impossible creature for themselves. This is exactly what I was afraid of, Morvek growled. That thing is going to bring nothing but trouble to this station. We should have let it die in quarantine. Her name is Luna, Sarah said firmly. And she's not a thing. She's a sentient being who deserves protection, not persecution. Morvek's cybernetic eyes flared. Protection? Do you have any idea what you've done? The Zrak-Ti nearly destroyed galactic civilization once before. Every species out there has genetic memories of their terror. And you want to protect one. I want to understand one, Sarah shot back. Because nothing about Luna matches the historical descriptions. She's intelligent, gentle, and capable of forms of communication we've never encountered before. Communication? Kex leaned forward, his 4 arms gesticulating with interest. What kind of communication? Sarah hesitated, knowing how her next words would sound. Mental contact. She showed me her memories, her people's history. The Zrak-Ti weren't monsters. They were victims. The command center fell silent. Even the background hum of the station's systems seemed to quiet, as everyone processed her words. Finally, Morvek spoke, his voice dangerously low. You're telling me that thing has been inside your head. It wasn't invasive, Sarah insisted. It was more like sharing. She was trying to help me understand. Understand what? That everything we think we know about the Zrak-Ti is wrong. Before anyone could respond, the communications officer called out from her station. Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from the Hegemony flagship Dominion. They're requesting immediate docking clearance and demanding to speak with Dr. Chen directly. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. The Hegemony was the galaxy's dominant military power, a coalition of species that had filled the power vacuum left by the Zrak-Ti's disappearance. If they were taking an interest in Luna, it meant trouble on a scale she had never imagined. Put them through, Morvek ordered. The main display flickered to life, showing the bridge of a massive warship. At the center stood Fleet Admiral Korthak, a hegemony general whose reputation for ruthless efficiency was known throughout the galaxy. His reptilian features were set in an expression of cold determination. Kepler Station, he said without preamble, you are harboring a Class Alpha extinction threat. By order of the Galactic Security Council, you will prepare the creature for immediate transfer to hegemony custody. Admiral, Administrator Kex began diplomatically, the creature is currently under medical care, and the creature is a Zrak-Ti, Korthak interrupted. There are no medical considerations. There is only the safety of civilized species throughout the galaxy. Sarah stepped forward before anyone could stop her. Admiral, with respect, the Zrak-Ti poses no threat in her current condition. She's injured, peaceful, and showing signs of intelligence that contradict the historical records. Korthak's cold eyes fixed on her through the display. Dr. Chun, I presume. Your reputation for reckless interspecies contact precedes you. But even you cannot be foolish enough to believe that proximity to a Zrak-Ti is safe. I've been in direct contact with her for 3 days, Sarah replied. She's shown nothing but gentleness and gratitude. I believe the historical accounts of Zrak-Ti aggression are either exaggerated or misunderstood. The Admiral's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Dr. Chun, my family line has guarded against the Zrak-Ti threat for 8 generations. My great-great-grandfather died in the siege of Altara, torn apart by creatures exactly like the one you're protecting. Do not presume to tell me that my ancestors died fighting gentle, misunderstood beings. Sarah felt the weight of history pressing down on her, but she refused to back down. Then, help me understand what really happened. Let me study Luna properly. If she is dangerous, I'll find proof. But if she's not, if the Zrak-Ti were something other than what we thought, Don't we owe it to all those who died to learn the truth? Admiral Korthak was silent for a long moment. Finally, he spoke, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. You have 48 hours, Dr. Chun. 48 hours to conduct your study under hegemony supervision. After that, the creature will be transferred to a secure containment facility where it will remain until the Council determines its fate. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. 48 hours, Sarah whispered. It wasn't enough time to prove anything, barely enough time to begin proper research. Sarah, Keck said gently, maybe this is for the best. You've done everything you could for the creature. Now, let the experts handle. The experts want to lock her away forever based on thousand-year-old prejudices, Sarah interrupted. That's not expertise, that's fear. She turned and headed for the exit, her mind already racing with possibilities. 48 hours to understand Luna, to learn the truth about her species, to somehow prove that compassion was stronger than fear. It seemed impossible, but as Sarah hurried back toward the medical bay, she remembered the connection she had felt with Luna, the images of her lost homeworld, the gentle intelligence in those silver eyes. If she was right about Luna, then humanity was about to prove something to the galaxy that they had never seen before, that sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from conquest or control, but from the simple act of refusing to let the wounded die alone. The next 48 hours would determine not just Luna's fate, but possibly the future of human-alien relations throughout the galaxy. And Sarah was determined to make every second count. Sarah barely slept during the next 36 hours. The medical bay had become her entire world, a sanctuary where she and Luna worked together to uncover truths that challenged everything the galaxy believed about the Zrak-Ti. What she discovered shook her to her core and would soon shake the foundations of galactic civilization itself. Luna's recovery had accelerated beyond anything Elon's medical projections had predicted. The deep wounds were now barely visible scars, and her silver eyes had regained their full brightness. More importantly, the mental connection between Sarah and Luna had grown stronger, allowing for increasingly complex communication. It had started with simple concepts: comfort, pain, safety. But as Luna regained her strength, the exchanges became more sophisticated. Luna could share not just images and emotions, but complex ideas, historical records encoded in her genetic memory, and something that took Sarah hours to understand: the true purpose of the Zrak-Ti species. Elon, Sarah called to her friend, who was monitoring Luna's latest neural scans. You need to see this. Dr. Reese looked up from her instruments, her expression a mixture of fascination and concern. The past day and a half had challenged every assumption she had about xenobiology, and she was clearly struggling to process the implications of what they were learning. More shared memories? Elon asked, moving closer to where Sarah sat beside Luna. More than that, Sarah said, gently stroking Luna's head. Luna, show her what you showed me about the Wanderers. Luna's eyes shifted to focus on Elon, and suddenly, both humans were connected to her consciousness. The medical bay around them seemed to fade, replaced by images that felt more real than reality itself. They found themselves standing on a vast crystalline plain beneath twin suns. In the distance, structures that defied physics rose into the sky. Buildings that seemed to grow rather than being constructed, their surfaces rippling with organic movement. But the most stunning sight was the inhabitants. Thousands of Zrak-Ti moved across the landscape, but not in the chaotic, aggressive manner the historical records described. They moved with purpose and coordination, working together on projects that spanned continents. Some tended to vast gardens where plants grew in impossible geometric patterns. Others worked with machinery that responded to thought rather than touch. They're not predators, Elon whispered, her voice filled with awe. They're gardeners, builders. The images shifted, showing Zrak-Ti vessels traveling between stars, but not as conquerors. They visited worlds that were dying, planets where ecosystems had collapsed, where species faced extinction, where civilizations had poisoned their own environments. And everywhere they went, the Zrak-Ti worked to heal. Sarah watched in amazement as Luna's people used their advanced technology to restore atmospheres, to bring extinct species back from genetic fragments, to teach struggling civilizations how to live in harmony with their worlds. The Zrak-Ti weren't destroyers. They were the galaxy's healers. But what about the wars? Sarah asked aloud. The historical records are filled with accounts of Zrakti aggression. The images shifted again, becoming darker. Now they saw the same Zrakti worlds, but something had changed. Where there had been harmony, now there was chaos. Zrakti fought each other with a savagery that matched every terrifying story Sarah had heard. But as she watched more closely, she began to see the truth. They're not fighting by choice, she gasped. Something is controlling them. Luna confirmed her observation with a flood of emotional data that nearly overwhelmed Sarah's consciousness. The Zrakti had encountered something in the deep void between galaxies, an ancient intelligence that fed on suffering and chaos. It had infected their species like a virus, turning their healing abilities into weapons, their cooperation into mindless aggression. The Devourers, Luna's voice echoed in both women's minds, the first time she had used actual words in their communication. My people fought them for 1,000 years, trying to break free from their control. In the end, we had to make a terrible choice. The final images showed the last free Zrakti gathering on their homeworld, their leaders making the hardest decision in their species' history. Rather than let the Devourers use them to destroy the galaxy, they would destroy themselves. Sarah watched in horror as the Zrakti activated some kind of planetary defense system, creating a resonance field that severed the connection between their species and the Devourer intelligence. But the process required a sacrifice. It killed 99% of their people instantly and left the survivors scattered across the galaxy, most of them dying alone in the void. You're one of the last, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face as the connection ended. Luna nadit sadly. There are perhaps a dozen of us left. Hidden, afraid to reveal ourselves, because the galaxy remembers only the monster we became, not the healers we were. Elon staggered back from the revelation, her medical scanner forgotten in her hands. Sarah, do you realize what this means? The Zrakti weren't the threat. They were trying to protect everyone from the real threat. Before Sarah could respond, the medical bay's doors burst open. Admiral Korthak strode in, flanked by 6 heavily armed hegemony soldiers. His reptilian features were set in an expression of grim determination, and his eyes fixed immediately on Luna. Your time is up, Dr. Chun, he said without preamble. Prepare the creature for transport. She has a name, Sarah said, standing protectively in front of Luna. Her name is Luna, and she's not going anywhere. Korthak's eyes narrowed. Stand aside, Doctor. This is not a request. Admiral, wait. Elon interjected, stepping forward with her scanner raised. You need to see what we've discovered. The historical records about the Zrakti, they're wrong. The records are written in the blood of my ancestors, Korthak replied coldly. I will not listen to revisionist theories based on the manipulations of a creature that should have been destroyed centuries ago. Sarah felt Luna tense behind her, and, through their connection, she sensed the Zrakti's fear. Not fear of death. Luna had been prepared for that since the moment she was found. But fear of what would happen if the truth died with her. Give me 5 minutes, Sarah said desperately. 5 minutes to show you what Luna showed me. If you still want to take her after that, I won't resist. Korthak paused, his hand resting on the plasma pistol at his side. You want me to allow that creature into my mind? To let it plant whatever lies or illusions it chooses? I want you to see the truth, Sarah replied. The real truth about what happened to the Zrakti and what they were trying to protect us from. The Admiral stared at Luna for a long moment. The Zrakti returned his gaze steadily, her silver eyes calm despite the weapons pointed at her. Finally, Korthak spoke. I will give you 3 minutes. But, Doctor, if this is some kind of trick, if that creature attempts to harm me in any way, my soldiers will vaporize both of you before you can blink. Sarah nodded and turned to Luna. Show him, she whispered. Show him everything. Luna rose gracefully from her resting position and approached Admiral Korthak slowly. The hegemony soldiers tensed, their weapons tracking her movement, but Korthak held up a hand to stop them. Get on with it, he said, though Sarah could see the tension in his posture. Luna stopped just out of arm's reach and fixed her silver eyes on the Admiral's face. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Korthak's expression changed, his eyes widening as the connection formed. What followed were the longest 3 minutes of Sarah's life. She watched as Admiral Korthak experienced the same revelation she had. The true nature of the Zrakti, their role as healers and guardians, the horror of their corruption by the Devourers, and their ultimate sacrifice to save the galaxy from a fate worse than anything they could imagine. When the connection ended, Korthak staggered backward, his face pale beneath his reptilian scales. His soldiers moved to support him, but he waved them away, his eyes never leaving Luna's face. "Impossible," he whispered. "The archives, the testimonies, the physical evidence, all of it points to Zrak-Ti aggression." "Because that's what you were meant to see," Luna said, her mental voice reaching everyone in the room. "The Devourers are patient. They knew that someday my people might be discovered again. They made sure the galaxy would fear us too much to listen." Korthak was silent for several minutes, processing what he had learned. Finally, he spoke to his soldiers without taking his eyes off Luna. "Stand down," he ordered. "Lower your weapons." "Sir," one of the soldiers questioned. "Our orders were to secure the creature. Our orders were based on incomplete information," Korthak said firmly. "I'm calling for an emergency session of the Galactic Council. This changes everything." Sarah felt a surge of relief and hope, but Luna's mental touch carried a note of warning. "The Devourers are still out there," the Zrak-Ti said. "They've been patient for 1,000 years, waiting for the galaxy to grow complacent. My survival, your compassion, the truth being revealed, these things will draw their attention." "What do you mean?" Admiral Korthak asked. Luna moved to the viewing port, gazing out at the stars beyond the station. "They can sense when their plans are threatened. They will come, and they will try to finish what they started. The corruption of my people was just the beginning. They want to devour this entire galaxy, to feed on the suffering of every living world." The weight of her words settled over the room like a shroud. Sarah realized that saving Luna had been just the first step in something much larger, a conflict that would determine the fate of every species in the galaxy. "How long do we have?" Korthak asked. Luna's silver eyes reflected the starlight as she continued to gaze into the void. "Not long. They're already moving. I can feel their presence at the edge of known space, growing stronger." Sarah joined Luna at the viewing port, placing a gentle hand on her friend's head. "Then, we need to be ready for them. All of us, together." Luna looked up at her with something that might have been hope. "You would fight beside us? Even after everything your species has endured from galactic politics?" "Especially because of that," Sarah replied. "Humanity has always been considered the weakest species in the galaxy. Maybe it's time to show everyone that our strength comes from something they don't understand. Our refusal to abandon those who need help." Admiral Korthak moved to join them at the viewing port. "If what you've shown me is true, then the hegemony has been preparing for the wrong war for centuries. We'll need to completely restructure our defenses." "Not just the hegemony," Luna said. "Every species, every world, every civilization that wants to survive what's coming. The Devourers don't distinguish between predator and prey. To them, all life is just food to be consumed." As if summoned by their conversation, the station's communication system activated. Messages were pouring in from across the galaxy. Reports of strange energy signatures detected at the galactic rim, deep space monitoring stations going silent, and, most ominously, several outer colonies reporting that their inhabitants had begun acting strangely aggressive. The Devourers had returned, and the galaxy was completely unprepared for what was coming. But for the first time in 1,000 years, they would not face the darkness alone. They had Luna, they had the truth, and they had something the ancient enemy had never encountered before: the stubborn compassion of a species that refused to let anyone fight alone. The real war was about to begin. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in the organization's 800-year history. Representatives from 43 species gathered in the massive chamber aboard the neutral station Concordia, their voices creating a cacophony of debate that threatened to drown out any hope of productive discussion. At the center of it all, Sarah sat beside Luna, both of them surrounded by enough security to protect a small fleet. The past week had transformed the galaxy's understanding of itself. Luna's revelations, confirmed by deep archaeological surveys and historical analysis, had shattered centuries of accepted truth. Ancient battlefields once attributed to Zrak-Ti aggression were being re-examined, revealing evidence of a third party, traces of technology, and energy signatures that matched nothing in any known database. But knowledge and acceptance were two different things. "This is preposterous," bellowed Representative Gordhak of the Hegemony Council, his massive form looming over the speaking platform. You ask us to believe that our most feared enemies were actually our protectors? That every historical record, every eyewitness account, every piece of physical evidence has been fabricated? Not fabricated, Sarah replied, standing to address the chamber. Manipulated. The Devourers are masters of psychological warfare. They understand that fear is more powerful than any weapon. Senator Vile of the Trade Federation, her crystalline body chiming with agitation, added her voice to the debate. Even if we accept this fantastic tale, what proof do we have that these Devourers actually exist? We have only the word of a creature whose species nearly destroyed galactic civilization. Luna rose gracefully from her position beside Sarah, her silver eyes scanning the assembled representatives. When she spoke, her mental voice reached every being in the chamber, regardless of their species' natural communication methods. You want proof, Luna said, her tone carrying the weight of centuries of sorrow. Then, observe what is happening at your borders. The central holographic display activated, showing a star map of the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where colonies had gone silent, where deep space sensors had detected anomalous energy readings, and where rescue ships had found entire populations exhibiting the same symptoms: unexplained aggression, loss of individual will, and a driving need to spread their condition to others. Admiral Korthak, who had spent the week reviewing every classified military report from the past century, stepped forward to address the chamber. 3 days ago, the colony world of Nexar 7 ceased all communications. When our investigation team arrived, they found the entire population of 12 million inhabitants acting in perfect coordination, constructing some kind of transmission array. When approached, the colonists attacked with weapons they shouldn't have known how to build. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The infection is spreading, Luna continued. My people called it the Gray Tide, a corruption that turns free-willed beings into extensions of the Devourer consciousness. Once it takes hold of a world, that world becomes a staging ground for further expansion. Dr. Elon Reese, who had been granted special permission to attend as Sarah's research partner, activated her portable holographic projector. We've been studying the energy signatures from the affected areas. They match patterns found in Luna's genetic memory, the same corruption that destroyed the Zrak-Ti civilization. How many worlds? Asked Representative Vash of the Outer Colonies, his insectoid features twitching with anxiety. 17 confirmed, Korthak replied grimly. And the rate of expansion is accelerating. At current projections, the infection will reach core worlds within 6 months. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted over each other in dozens of languages, some demanding immediate military action, others calling for quarantine protocols, and a few suggesting that they simply abandon the affected regions entirely. Through the noise, Luna's voice cut like a silver blade, reaching directly into the minds of every being present. Silence. The single word, delivered with the full force of Luna's psychic abilities, brought immediate quiet to the chamber. In the sudden stillness, she continued speaking. You argue about military strategies and containment protocols, but you do not understand what you face. The Devourers are not invaders in the traditional sense. They are a force of entropy given consciousness, beings that exist only to consume and corrupt. They cannot be negotiated with, cannot be reasoned with, and cannot be defeated through conventional warfare. Then, how do we fight them? Senator Vile asked, her crystalline form resonating with fear. The same way my people should have fought them from the beginning, Luna replied. Together, Sarah stepped forward, her voice carrying across the chamber without artificial amplification. Luna has shown me the true history of Zrak-Ti wars. Every time her people tried to fight the Devourers in isolation, they failed. The corruption spread faster than any single species could contain it. But there were moments, brief periods when different species worked together when the tide was turned. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed a detailed analysis of the ancient conflict. The Zrak-Ti's greatest success against the Devourers came when they formed alliances with other species. Not client relationships or vassal arrangements, but true partnerships based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Admiral Korthak nodded slowly. A unified defense network, shared intelligence, coordinated responses, combined technologies from multiple species. More than that, Luna said, the Devourers feed on discord. on the selfish impulses that drive species apart. Their corruption takes hold fastest in minds that are already isolated, already consumed with fear or hatred. But beings who are truly connected to others, who have formed bonds of genuine care and trust, are much harder to corrupt. Representative Gordhack laughed harshly. You're suggesting that friendship is a weapon against cosmic horror? I'm suggesting, Sarah said firmly, that compassion is the one force the Devourers have never been able to understand or counter. It's why Luna survived when the rest of her people perished. It's why I was able to connect with her when everyone else saw only a monster. And it's why humanity might be the key to winning this war. The chamber fell silent again, but this time the quiet was thoughtful rather than shocked. Senator Vile was the first to speak. Humanity has always been considered the weakest species in the galactic community. No advanced technology, no natural weapons, limited psychic abilities. What could you possibly contribute to a conflict of this magnitude? Sarah smiled, thinking of all the times she had heard similar statements throughout her career. You're right. We don't have advanced technology or natural weapons. What we have is something else, something that every other species in this chamber has sacrificed in the name of efficiency and progress. She paused, looking around the chamber at representatives who had spent centuries viewing their interactions as zero-sum competitions. We remember how to care about beings who aren't our own species. The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah could see the reactions rippling through the assembled representatives, some offended, others thoughtful, a few beginning to understand. Luna rose and moved to Sarah's side, her silver eyes reflecting the lights of the chamber. Dr. Chen speaks truth. In all our genetic memories, in all the records of species that fought the Devourers, only humanity has consistently shown the ability to form bonds of genuine affection across species lines. It's more than affection, Dr. Reese added, consulting her research notes. Sarah's neural patterns while bonded with Luna show connections that we've never observed before. The human brain, it appears, is uniquely suited for forming empathic links with non-human consciousness. Admiral Korthak was studying the tactical implications. If humans can bond with other species the way Dr. Chan has bonded with Luna, then they could serve as living communication networks. Instant coordination across multiple species, immune to the Devourer's corruption because the bonds themselves act as a defense. But it would require trust, Senator Vile observed. Complete, absolute trust between species that have spent centuries viewing each other as competitors or threats. Sarah nodded. It would require everyone in this chamber to believe that cooperation is more powerful than conquest, that helping others is more important than helping only yourselves. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours. Representatives argued about logistics, about historical precedents, about the risks of allowing humans to form psychic bonds with their species' most sensitive individuals. Some species threatened to withdraw from the council entirely rather than submit to what they saw as human mental infiltration. But as the arguments raged, reports continued to arrive from the frontier. More worlds falling silent, more populations showing signs of corruption, and, most ominously, long-range sensors detecting massive energy signatures moving inward from the galactic rim. Something vast and alien approaching at speeds that should have been impossible. Finally, as dawn broke over Concordia Station's observation decks, Representative Gordhack called for order one final time. We have argued enough, he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion and decision. The hegemony will support this alliance. Our ships, our soldiers, our resources, all at the disposal of a unified defense. One by one, other representatives added their voices to the agreement. Not all of them. Several species chose to withdraw, deciding to face the threat alone rather than risk human influence. But enough agreed to form the foundation of something unprecedented in galactic history. Then it's decided, Admiral Korthak announced. The Grand Alliance is hereby established, with Earth as the coordinating center and Dr. Sarah Chun as the primary liaison for interspecies bonding protocols. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Luna pressed against her side, offering comfort and strength through their connection. How long do we have? Sarah asked. Luna's eyes turned toward the viewing ports, looking out at stars that no longer seemed safe and familiar. The main Devourer fleet will reach the outer colonies within 2 months. If we're going to prove that unity is stronger than corruption, we need to be ready by then. 2 months to forge alliances between species that have been rivals for centuries. 2 months to teach beings who had never trusted anyone outside their own kind to open their minds to human connection. 2 months to prove that compassion could stand against cosmic horror. It seemed impossible. But as Sarah looked around the chamber at representatives who were already beginning to plan joint operations and shared resources, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. The Devourers had destroyed the Zrak by exploiting their isolation. But they had never faced an enemy that drew strength from connection, that became more powerful through cooperation rather than competition. The galaxy was about to discover what humanity had known all along: that the strongest weapon against the darkness was the simple refusal to face it alone. The Battle of the Void Gate would be remembered as the moment when the galaxy learned that love could triumph over entropy itself. But in the minutes before the fighting began, as Sarah stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity with Luna at her side, and psychic links connecting her to representatives of 37 different species, she felt only the crushing weight of hope and terror warring in her chest. 2 months of preparation had transformed the galaxy. The bonding process that Sarah had pioneered with Luna had been replicated across hundreds of worlds, creating a network of connected consciousness unlike anything the universe had ever seen. Hegemony warriors found themselves mentally linked with gentle crystalline philosophers. Board hack engineers shared thoughts with delirium artists. And at the center of it all, human coordinators like Sarah served as living bridges between minds that had never imagined they could truly understand each other. The Devourers had not been idle during this time. 17 infected worlds had become 53. The corruption spread like a plague through the outer colonies, turning entire populations into extensions of an alien will that hungered for nothing but destruction and consumption. And now, emerging from a void between galaxies, came the source of that corruption. Visual contact established, announced Captain Torres from her position at the Unity's command station. The main display flickered to life, showing something that challenged every assumption about what constituted life. The Devourer flagship was less a ship than a living wound in space itself. Kilometers long and seemingly constructed from crystallized darkness, it pulsed with veins of sickly light that hurt to look at directly. Around it, a fleet of smaller vessels, each one an amalgamation of corrupted technology from dozens of different species, moved with perfect, terrifying coordination. Energy readings are off the charts, reported Dr. Ilan Reese from her science station. That thing is generating power on the scale of a small star. And the psychic emanations. She shuddered, her instruments barely able to process the data they were receiving. Sarah felt the waves of corruption washing over the fleet, probing at the mental barriers that protected the Grand Alliance. Through her connections, she could sense the fear and revulsion of her linked companions as they experienced the Devourer's true nature for the first time. "Hold the links," she said softly, her voice carrying through the psychic network to every connected mind in the fleet. "Remember what we're fighting for. Remember why we stand together." Luna pressed closer to her side, adding her strength to the mental defenses. Around the galaxy, other surviving Zrak 11 ancient souls who had emerged from hiding when they learned of Luna's survival, lent their power to the network. Together, they created something the Devourers had never encountered: a unified will that grew stronger under pressure rather than fragmenting. Admiral Korthak's voice crackled over the communication system from his position commanding the military wing of the fleet. "All ships maintain formation. Remember, our goal isn't to destroy their fleet. It's to get close enough for the psychic strike to reach their command ship." The plan was desperate in its simplicity. The Devourer's corruption worked through psychic contamination, turning their victims into willing servants. But the same pathway that allowed them to spread their influence could potentially be reversed. If the Grand Alliance could project their unified consciousness directly into the Devourer command ship, they might be able to corrupt the corruptors, to fill them with emotions and connections they couldn't understand or process. It was a theory that had never been tested against beings of such cosmic power. But it was the only strategy that offered any hope of victory. "Devourer fleet is changing formation," Captain Torres reported. They're not attacking. They're just watching us." Through the psychic link, Sarah felt a presence touch her mind. ancient, alien, and filled with contempt that spanned eons. When the Devourer consciousness spoke, its voice echoed through every connected mind in the fleet. "Foolish children," it said, the words carrying undertones of amusement and disgust. "Did you think we would not sense your pathetic attempt at unity? Did you believe that the bonds between your primitive species could stand against forces that have devoured galaxies?" Sarah forced herself to respond, though speaking to such an entity felt like staring into the heart of a black hole. "We believe that connection is stronger than consumption. That creation is more powerful than destruction." The laughter that answered her was like the sound of stars dying. "Connection? You speak of connection while your species war against each other over resources and territory. You speak of unity while your histories are written in the blood of those who are different from you." The Devourer's words carried psychic weight, dredging up memories of every conflict, every betrayal, every moment of selfishness that had ever existed between the connected minds. Sarah felt the network trembling as beings across the fleet confronted the darkest aspects of their own natures. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of fragmenting under the assault of negative emotions, the network began to resonate with something else. Luna was the first to push back, her memories flowing through the connections, not of the wars and hatred the Devourers were trying to emphasize, but of the healing her people had brought to dying worlds, of the joy they had felt when lifeless planets bloomed with new growth. Admiral Korthak's memories followed, not of the battles he had fought, but of the soldiers he had saved, the worlds he had protected, the peace he had helped to preserve. Senator Vile shared the beauty of her species' crystal gardens, grown to bring happiness to beings of flesh and bone who could never survive on her homeworld. One by one, every connected mind in the fleet began sharing not their darkest moments, but their brightest. Acts of kindness that crossed species lines. Sacrifices made for strangers. The simple, everyday choices to help rather than harm, to build rather than tear down. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as the full weight of galactic compassion flowed through her consciousness. This was what the Devourers couldn't understand. Not that sentient beings were capable of evil, but that they consistently chose good despite having every reason not to. "You see only what you wish to see," Sarah said, her voice now carrying the conviction of billions of connected souls. "Yes, we fight. Yes, we fail. Yes, we're selfish and stupid and scared most of the time. But we also love. We sacrifice. We choose to protect those who can't protect themselves, even when it costs us everything." The Devourer's response was immediate and devastating. Waves of pure corruption lashed out from their fleet, seeking to tear apart the connections that bound the Grand Alliance together. Ships shuddered as their crews were overwhelmed by alien hatred and despair. But the network held. More than held, it began to push back. Dr. Reese's voice cut through the psychic static. "Sarah, the energy readings from their command ship are fluctuating. Something's happening to their control matrix." Through her enhanced senses, Sarah could feel it too. The Devourer consciousness, so certain of its superiority, was experiencing something it had never encountered in its eons of existence. Genuine, selfless emotion directed toward it not with the intention to destroy, but to heal. "They can't process it," Luna said with wonder. "They've spent so long feeding on hatred and fear that they've forgotten how to defend against love." The realization spread through the network like wildfire. This wasn't a battle to be won through superior firepower or tactical brilliance. This was a war for the very soul of consciousness itself, and the Grand Alliance's weapon was something the Devourers had never learned to counter: the simple desire to help those who were suffering. "All ships, advance," Admiral Korthak commanded. "Focus everything on the command ship. Let them feel what it means to be truly connected." The Grand Alliance fleet surged forward, no longer held back by fear of the enemy's power. Through the psychic network, every being aboard every ship reached out with their consciousness, not to attack the Devourers, but to embrace them. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Devourer command ship began to convulse, its crystallized darkness cracking as it was flooded with emotions it couldn't comprehend. Other ships in their fleet lost coordination as the alien intelligence that controlled them struggled to process the unprecedented assault of compassion. But the Devourers weren't defenseless. As their mental control began to slip, they lashed out with physical weapons of unimaginable power. Beams of pure entropy tore through space, disintegrating everything they touched. Several Alliance ships simply ceased to exist, their crews dying in bursts of light that left nothing behind. Through the network, Sarah felt every death as if it were her own. The pain threatened to shatter her focus, to break the connections that held everything together. But then she felt the response of the surviving crews. Not rage or despair, but an even deeper determination to protect those who remained. "They're giving everything they have," Captain Torres said, her voice thick with emotion as she watched ships sacrifice themselves to shield others from the Devourer weapons. Every species, every crew. They're fighting not just for their own survival, but for everyone. Sarah realized that this was the moment of truth. The Devourers had always won before because they could corrupt their enemies, turn them against each other, make them forget why they were fighting. But the Grand Alliance was fighting for each other. Every death only strengthened their resolve. Every sacrifice deepened their connections. "Now," Sarah whispered, reaching out through the network with everything she had. "Show them what they've been missing. Show them what it means to truly live." The psychic assault that followed wasn't an attack in any conventional sense. It was an offering. 37 species, united in purpose, opened their hearts and minds to beings that had known only hunger for eons beyond counting. They shared their memories of beauty, their experiences of joy, their understanding of what it meant to love something more than yourself. The Devourer command ship screamed. The sound was like reality itself tearing apart, a noise that existed on frequencies that shouldn't have been possible. Through the psychic link, Sarah felt the alien consciousness convulsing as it was forced to confront concepts it had spent eternity trying to destroy. And then, impossibly, she felt something crack in the Devourer's mental defenses. For just a moment, the alien intelligence stopped trying to consume and destroy. For just a moment, it remembered what it had been before the hunger consumed it. For just a moment, it felt what its victims had felt. The connections, the love, the simple joy of existing in harmony with others. The moment lasted less than a second before the Devourer consciousness recoiled in horror from its own buried memories. But that second was enough. The cracks in its mental structure spread like fractures through glass, and suddenly, the vast intelligence that had terrorized galaxies was tearing itself apart. Across the Devourer fleet, ships began to shut down as their controlling intelligence fragmented. The corrupted beings aboard them stopped their coordinated movements, confusion replacing the alien will that had driven them. "The network is collapsing," Dr. Reese reported. "Their entire command structure is in freefall." But Sarah barely heard her. Through the psychic link, she was feeling something unprecedented, the death of a cosmic entity that had existed since before most stars were born. But it wasn't dying in agony or rage. As its consciousness finally shattered completely, the Devourer experienced something it had never known in its endless existence: peace. The death scream that followed was somehow beautiful, a sound like the universe itself sighing in relief as an ancient wound finally healed. In the aftermath, as the Devourer fleet drifted powerless through space, and the corrupted beings aboard them began to remember who they had been before the infection took hold, Sarah found herself sitting on the floor of the Unity's bridge with Luna in her arms. Around her, representatives of 37 species wept openly as they processed what they had accomplished together. "Is it over?" Captain Torres asked quietly. Sarah looked out at the stars, feeling through the psychic network the gradual awakening of millions of minds that have been trapped in corruption for months or years. Across the galaxy, infected worlds were beginning to remember themselves. The gray tide was receding, leaving behind beings who were scarred but free. "This part is over," she said finally. "But what we've built here, this connection between species, this proof that cooperation is stronger than conquest, this is just the beginning." Luna lifted her head to look at Sarah with those brilliant silver eyes. "My people spent 1,000 years in hiding, believing that the darkness had won permanently. But you've shown us that light doesn't come from being the strongest or the smartest. It comes from refusing to let others face the darkness alone." Admiral Korthak's voice crackled over the communication system, tired but triumphant. "All ships, report status. And someone start calculating how we're going to get all these former prisoners back to their homeworlds." Sarah smiled, feeling the psychic network beginning to relax from combat readiness into something warmer, a genuine community of minds that span species and star systems. The galaxy had faced its greatest threat and discovered that its greatest strength had been there all along, waiting for someone brave enough to believe in it. That, she said to Luna, is exactly the kind of problem I hope we'll spend the rest of our lives solving. As the Grand Alliance fleet began the long work of rescue and rebuilding, Sarah realized that her decision to save one dying alien in a shelter had indeed changed everything. But not in the way anyone could have predicted. She hadn't just saved Luna. She had helped the galaxy save itself, by proving that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe was the simple refusal to let anyone suffer alone. The age of isolation was over. The age of connection had begun. And at the heart of it all was a bond between a human woman and an alien creature that everyone had called a monster, showing that love truly was stronger than fear. In the end, that had been enough to light the darkness and change the fate of everything that lived among the stars.